Well, hello everybody. Gosh, and I greet you along with my neighbor's dog, who will always start barking right here at my window when podcasts start. Anyway, you'll all get to know her by the end of this, I'm sure. Her name is Lady. Clearly, she has a lot to say.
So.
In the meantime, happy Friday. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. Really, really good to have you back with me again, Leo. How are you?
Well, let the dog bark. I mean, it's like the serious period of the year. The dog days are finished, but I guess they continue in South Africa. Welcome to, once again, my presence here, of course, was requested by Chantelle because we would like to always kind of go through my books and topics that, of course, might interest you. And I think that today Chantelle has a lot to offer. So here we go with an episode of Aquarius Rising Africa with ZAGAMI and Chantelle Meyburgh.
Indeed. Well, before we go ahead with that, what have you been up to these past couple of weeks? What's on your agenda? Anything interesting that you're up to that you want to share with the viewers?
Mostly promoting my new book, Volume 9, as you can see, and then at the same time I'm working on new projects, a kind of an alchemist has an atom or an imaginary oven that he kind of works things in, and it's like my oven, it's working out the possibility of a new book, but it's still taking a direction, maybe another one after. And I would like this book to be particularly important and relevant for 2024, the new book I'm about to write. So I'm kind of working around laying the foundations for it. And at the same time, of course, like I said, I have also other projects like the Italian work that I'm conducting. And so I'm also finishing up a book in Italian that it's a new edition, actually, of what in America was published as The Invisible Master. So, I mean, pretty busy as usual in my work. And as you know, I also have my little dog, Rambo, but fortunately he doesn't bark during the broadcast.
Well, I don't really have dogs, and this is probably a reason why. I've got cats. I'm a feline. So, but anyway, she'll calm down soon. But yeah, I think what really, and I know we started a few weeks back already speaking about your Volume 9 book, which I haven't got yet, and we definitely want to get it on Kindle. But there's really some amazing, I'm just going through some of the chapters here. And one thing that comes to me, I mean, I know we probably have spoken about some of this before, but maybe you can just reaffirm that, which is, I think what you got here in chapter 6 is communist UFOs. I find that very interesting because there's so much of that in our faces right now. And there's so many people that are coming up and disclosing around these topics, guys that have been in the military, people that have had training from crazy otherworldly experiences. So I would just love to hear what you have to say about this, the communist UFOs, Poseidonism, and the new age of deception. I mean, give us a little tidbit on that.
This is a topic not many people know about, but people like, let's say, in the so-called intelligentsia of the left love, because there was an Argentine Trotskyist called Juan Posadas, who basically created the basis for what is known as Posadism. Now, this guy basically, it's a guy that not many people know about, but because of his militancy, especially within what is defined as Trotskyism, and what is basically a branch of the militant left, this guy was pretty popular, but he mixed basically ufology and communism, because he believed that the UFOs were evidence of communist societies in other galaxies. I know it's pretty far out, and many people might find it even funny, but these people are pretty serious about requalifying Posadism these days. In fact, in 2020, a journalist from the New York Times, who works for a number of publications. He worked out and presented positivism once again, and it became kind of like a relaunch of this ideology, which mixes not only ufology and communism, but also it has an end times apocalyptic twist to it, because he was actively going around to promote the idea that we should, the great nuclear powers should actually get on with a nuclear war, because in that case, the outcome will be actually communism. So, I mean, it is definitely, how can we say, a very twisted ideology, but it is also something that created a political movement, which in the 1960s created also the Fourth International Posadis. Now, what is the Fourth International? It's a little bit like the mimicking the Soviet-controlled Communist International Organization. He became such a pain in the ass, sorry if I use this term, that in Cuba, even Fidel Castro said this guy was really a nonsense. And so Posadas is now dead for many years. He died in 1981. And he was actually of Italian origin. His name was Omero Romulo Cristalli Frasnelli. But I wanted to talk about it because the leftists are requalifying him also, not only because of the UFO idea that he has, that UFOs are a sign that there is a communism militancy around the universe, but because of the really demented idea that we can solve everything with a nuclear blast. And I know it sounds pretty sick, but I once met a Posadist, and that's what I talk about also in volume 9. And it was the New Year's Eve of the year 2000. I was in Norway, and suddenly this guy started to talk with me. We were just having, like you do, a drink. And in this party, and he started to talk to me about his ideology. So I said, describe me your ideology. And ultimately, I was shocked when he says, well, I'm looking forward to this big nuclear blast and appearing in front of me. And I was like, what is he talking about? So the fact that the leftist intelligentsia, the intellectuals of the New York Times and others are writing books and publishing articles about them and relaunching what was what Posadas had announced, well, it makes me understand that these libtards, these leftists, are more sick than we can imagine. I mean, because they really want to push us towards the consequences that right now, I mean, I'm talking about the last few hours. So there is some alarming news that is coming, for example, from Zaporizhia, which is the nuclear plant there, which is been in the hands of Russia for the last few months, and of course is part of this ongoing struggle between Russia and Ukraine. If anything really nuclear or atomic will get loose in the atmosphere, we always know that the consequences are really bad. I mean, look what happened and what is still happening, and what is going to happen for 1,000 years and more with Fukushima. So the fact that, first of all, in this contemporary society, we are requalifying the use of nuclear because we say that is a better solution for instead than using, of course, fossil fuels. I think it's completely demented. I think it's completely demented, and unfortunately, there's a lot of conservative people that are trying to push also here in America the idea that we should open more nuclear plants. And at the same time, the ones that are already opened, they are at times leaking and creating problems without us even knowing in the majority of cases. So it's kind of disturbing. Of course, we have also Bill Gates in all this, because then you cannot miss Bill Gates in this. We have encountered Bill Gates over and over again with the pandemic, but he has also now a key role in proposing a new form of nuclear power, which is supposed to be a cleaner form of nuclear power. However, like I said, I'm very skeptic about it, and in my book, I mainly discuss the Posadist idea that the atomic war is going, to provoke a true inferno on Earth, but they will not impede communism. I mean, these people are truly sick in their ideas, so they need to be exposed. That's why I put them in my books. I can't hear you. Sorry.
I forgot that I'd muted my dog and myself.
No worries.
She's quieting down now. I mean, it's like the whole New World Order is a whole communistic agenda. I mean, if you look at it, what is Klaus Schwab's famous words? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I mean, that is such a communist idea to begin with, right? And already, I mean, it's more and more moving towards that. But I find it
like, in my book, I describe the difference between Plato's view of communism and Karl Marx's view of communism, which is a very different view. I mean, in Plato's view, actually, the rich people, the people on top, should be communists, because once they achieve that level of responsibility over society, that immense wealth, well, what else can they do? So that is instead, with Karl Marx, we find what has been clearly showed over and over again with the Marxist communist dictatorship. You have the Kim Jong-un of the situation and his family that become a sort of royalty, or like Xi Jinping in China, or some other countries where these people construct an elite behind the scene. But then they want the majority of people to practice communism. That was completely the opposite of what Plato wanted. He said the people need to have an incentive, and basically they can't be, communist, but the elite eventually might be communist. So here, this inverting these roles means that people like Klaus Schwab and others will continue to make billions, while instead the majority of us will be left with the so-called universal basic income to survive and try to arrive to the next month by sharing a car, by sharing a house, by sharing everything with a stranger. Something that I find very, very wrong.
It is very wrong. It's just part of, again, it's the next level of control. These 15-minute cities that they now, I think they've already started putting them up, and that's now the next big climate control hoax, right? Because we've been so bad. We have mistreated our planet so badly. And I'm sorry, I think, yes, part of that is true. We need to learn a lot about being stewards of this planet, for sure. If we were true stewards as human beings, these guys would not have taken over, and they would not have been able to buy our leaders over, because no matter what you say, every finger points in the direction of these guys coming in with their technologies and stuff and buying the leaders over and basically agreeing to use humanity as their slave farms. That's really the bottom line. So when we can change that, and that's exactly, I keep saying this. Yeah.
Because you see, it's not only that. The problem here is not only the 15-minute cities. I wrote in chapter 2 of my Confession 9, I wrote, it's like we have, of course, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Sabbatean Frankists to control them, the Jesuits. They no longer hide their evil intentions, going so far as to push the construction of smart cities or 15-minute cities. And here I'm quoting my own book, in which tens of millions of brainwashed millennials can be relocated and live side by side in small apartment complexes that move through a constant maze of entrances and exits, accessed solely through digital ID verification and approval that comes, of course, inevitably from what we know as the mark of the beast. There is a problem here because it's also their intention to eliminate gradually that population. It's not just to leave them in that condition. It's to leave them in that condition. Then, of course, through various means, and I don't want to tell all those means because the algorithm here otherwise might just bring us down the video. So you can imagine, I mean, from the pandemic onwards, what their means are. And so people will be gradually eliminated. They will not be left. You know, if they are castrated, if they are eliminated gradually, there is nothing left. And so these millennials might enjoy for the moment their 15-minute cities. In essence, though, like I wrote, and here I reopen quote from volume 9, in essence, the goal is to create a digital panopticon, that's what is known as, that is implementing all the surveillance programs possible and imaginable through the AI to provide future rulers with absolute control while leaving everyone else in a permanent state of docile incarceration. Then they can continue being the elite. They can continue making money. They can be the 1% that rules over the 99%. So
I find it very interesting what you were saying earlier on. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the name of that creature. Is it Poseidon? What was that?
We were talking about the
Poseidism. I'm not sure if I've got the right pronunciation, but you said you met one of those guys, and all he said, I mean, I want to just make sure I heard you correctly. And he said he can't wait to see the world go up in one nuclear bomb. Did I hear you correctly when you said that?
The ideology that we were talking a minute ago that was promoted by the Posadist. The Posadist is, I mean, I'm not saying that every communist is a Posadist. Actually, the Posadists are a curious minority within the leftist spectrum. However, the intelligentsia, the intellectuals of today, from the New Inquiry, the New York Times, the Outline, Vice, and so on, are relaunching the Posadists also through the publication of a book. Through the publication of a book that was rather successful by this journalist called A.M. Gillitz, and it is their idea to promote this insane vision that, like I said earlier, the UFOs are communist and the solution is to bomb the planet, so then we can be left with nothing and everybody's a communist at that point, because it's kind of like a tabula rasa that they're promoting, a tabula rasa of everything, so then you can rebuild out of that nothing, or that what is left, a communist dictatorship of sorts, because communism inevitably tends to become a dictatorship. And Trotskyism in particular, and the Trotskyists have always had a very specific way of promoting communism, which also is a violent way of promoting communism. I mean, Trotskyism meant the idea that the proletary, the Russian proletary in that case, might win the power in advance of the Western proletariat, but it could not confine itself within the limits of a democratic dictatorship, but would be compelled to undertake the initial socialist measures, and at the end, though, it would promote all this through violent means even. So the fact, like I said, I inserted the Posadist thing mostly as a curiosity of what the left is trying to promote for the young people. The idea that they can relaunch Posadist, that was almost forgotten ideology, that, however, created some political parties in the South, in South America, which are still active. There is political parties that were launched by this Fourth International Posadist movement of Trotskyists, that eventually will become then parties that got involved in South American politics. And we know that South American politics is a big mess. But the truth about this big mess, and I will say this over and over again, lays mostly with the Jesuits, because it was the Jesuits who ruled South America, and from the start created these problems. The way that they created these problems was also by, they were the ones who also implemented slavery, they were the ones that initially encouraged the monarchs to implement slavery, by the way. They were the ones who arrived and destroyed or tried to transform forcibly in Catholicism cultures that had nothing to do with Christianity, and that were forced by the Jesuits. So the Jesuit controversies, I think, is the basis also of the misery that we see in South and Central America. And the problem here also is that this misery is now being pushed towards us, because those millions of people who are trying to invade here the United States of America, and this is, of course, we talked about the subject already in the last episode. It is an orchestrated plan that is seeing an invasion plan both from Africa into Europe and from South America and Central America into America. It doesn't happen by coincidence that, you know, and then also...
When you say invasion, are you talking about these young men that have...
Also wonder if young men from Namibia or from Nigeria can arrive to the borders with Mexico.
Yeah, is that the invasion you're talking about? That there's these thousands of... Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's an hostile invasion. It's like I said, they're all men, so it's definitely an invasion. But regarding the reason why of the misery of these countries is, I personally think that the main responsibility for South and Central America, and I think that a lot of people will agree with me, is to ascribe to the Jesuits. The Jesuits that through their settlements, the so-called reductions, have contributed to the assimilation of indigenous nations in a way that wasn't appropriate. And they even encouraged these people to embrace guerrilla warfare in South and Central America, which created a mess. So this was the Jesuits. And today, when, for example, we talk about the invasion, the main people who are sustaining this invasion is Pope Francis, who over and over again is saying, let them in, let them in, let them in. Or goes to the border here with Mexico, or he goes to Lampedusa, the first island that we have in south of Italy, which basically where all these people arrive from North Africa. He's encouraging it. He's not inviting them to stay at the Vatican, though. He's not inviting them to share the riches of the Vatican or all the gold and they have and all the rest. He's basically simply saying, you pay and we welcome them, but you have to pay for them. So, you know, with your taxes, by giving up your own your own money for this, and also giving up your own safety and security when it comes to schools in New York or other cities that now have seen the results of this crazy migration, with you know, suddenly having to close down a school because it has to be used as a welcome center, or welcoming thousands of immigrant children who don't even speak the language, creating also problems within the schools, security problems, because, you know, the child or child between brackets of 15, 16 from South or Central America will go into a gender fluid bathroom and rape a girl, and then what you gonna do? And then what you gonna do? This is unfortunately what they're trying to do. They are destroying us. And so I think that the responsibility of the Jesuit order in doing all this, and the Jesuit order was denounced over and over again through the centuries. I mean, it wasn't like at one point they were even kicked out of the Vatican. So they are dangerous. I mean, it was, and they have had an immense influence. I mean, Albert Pike, which, as you know, in volume 9 of my confession, I talk about Albert Pike because he is one of the proposers also of a number of weird theories around the figure of Jesus. But it was Albert Pike that in Morals and Dogmas said, and I open quote here, 800 degrees of one kind and another, meaning Masonic degrees, were invented in fidelity, and even Jesuitry were taught under the mask of Masonry. So the Jesuits have always been infiltrating, manipulating, and in the end, I think that the Freemasonry, for the most, has capitulated in front of the Jesuits, who are completely controlling the whole Masonic field. Now, a lot of Freemasons say, "Oh, what is he saying? That's not true. I go to my lodge and did this and that." Well, the thing is that when you see how they are also encouraging, because we talked before we started the show, as you know, about religious relativism and this concept of religious relativism. What is this concept of religious relativism? It's basically encouraging more, and it's an idea that encourages basically the concept that at least one and probably more than one world religion is correct, and that the correctness of a religion is relative to the worldview of its community, of its adherents. So basically, it's all very relative. You can find the truth in this religion, in this other religion. There is no ultimately a religion that gives you the truth. That means religious relativism. And that is really what the Freemasons have promoted. And that's why, going back to what I was saying a moment ago, the Jesuits controlling Freemasonry, they have incentivized this relativism, because then in the end, who is now promoting this religious relativism? It's not anyone else than the Pope himself, by encouraging the birth of one world religion, going around meeting Muslim, Jews, Hindus, Sikh, Buddhists, and doing these rituals together. There was the other day in Marseille, the Pope, together with rabbis, I think also some Muslim clerics and so on, he did this mass in front there. It's rather beautiful. I mean, Marseille is a beautiful city on the sea, and he was there early in the morning with this beautiful sea and this beautiful sun, and he was saying, "You have to welcome all these immigrants. You have to open your houses to them," basically. And this is the plan. It's not only a religious relativism, it's then also a national relativism, sovereign relativism. There's no more sovereignty. Your country doesn't have any more sovereignty. Just open the doors, and at that point, you don't have a country anymore. But the moment you don't have a country, you don't have any more a constitution, you don't have rights. Now, we know that there is a difference living in South Africa, living in South America, living in other countries, and living in America. The main difference is the constitution. If Rio Zagami is in America now and is becoming an America, it's simply because this constitution guarantees me to talk freely to you, not have, like it happened in Europe, the police blasting through my door, breaking in, pointing a light at my wife and treating her like a criminal only because of what I was writing and saying. This happened in Europe. And so I saw what it means not having the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, or the right to bear a gun, which means defending yourself, defending your family. Meaning that, like it happens in South Africa, if 10 crooks arrive, and we saw it, you have a gun, you can defend yourself and shoot them down. If you don't have the guns, what are you going to do? You're going to have your daughter raped, you're going to be killed. This is what happens. So the fact that they are also encouraging, of course, more and more America to back off of its constitution, and the Democrats in particular, I nicknamed them in Volume 4 the Democrats, are gradually trying to mine the basis for the First and the Second Amendment, and they're doing it through Silicon Valley, censoring completely everything through algorithms. We have seen over and over again the injustice of having channels completely closed down from one moment to another just for an idea, concept, nothing violent, nothing. So I think that we need to understand that this constitution is a very precious gift that was given to mankind. It is a responsibility to preserve it, but after that, the United Nations is going to plant the seeds of destruction and evil worldwide, and it's going to take over with a one-world government, a one-world religion, and you're going to simply become a number. Now, volume 9 of my confessions wants to give you through 7 steps, so through these 7 chapters, a complete idea of all these problems, who is behind them, and then after, you know, it's your choice to move forward. It's like when I discussed in this book the lies, the mountain of lies surrounding the propaganda of the war in Ukraine. Only 2 days ago, 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered to the Russian. 10,000. Not talking about 10, 20, 100. 10,000 soldiers just lift their hands in the air and said, we don't want to continue in the meat grinder of this war, which is killing us. And it's like destroying all the youth of the country starting to disappear, because you see, the moment in which Ukraine closed down the borders and forced all the people from 18 to age 60 to come back, well, soon there's not going to be a youth anymore left. That country is doomed if they continue in this war. So the fact that they're starting to surrender with these big numbers, and that, of course, the Western media doesn't talk about it. They don't say, you know, they don't say, oh, today 10,000 soldiers gave up themselves to the Russian. Have you heard that? No.
No.
So yeah. The mountain also, like I said in my book of lies, continues, sadly.
I'd be interested to know, through all of this, what your take on Elon Musk at the moment is. You know, obviously, Mr. X, which is no longer Twitter. We're hearing a lot of stories around that, the Neuralink, his intentions with it. What is your take on that?
I never had a positive take on Elon Musk. I always denounced his ambiguity in my books over and over again, since volume 6.66, which is the first book I touched on the subject of cyber Satan. I started to discuss his ambiguity, and his ambiguity continues. I mean, the guy has flooded the whole surface of the earth and also the skies with things that are dangerous. I mean, the cars. Yesterday I was just driving and I saw a Tesla car on fire, and there was like, you know, people scared, and the car will probably stay on fire for days, not hours, because that's how it works when they go on fire. 1. 2, the satellites. There is at the moment 5,000 satellites of Elon Musk, and there is 9,000 stars that we can see from the Earth. Now, in a few years, those satellites might actually be more than the stars we see in the universe from the Earth, which is 9,000. And it's a dangerous thing to have 5,000 satellites because this is like a mass of objects which also are creating a cage around the world. If I want to leave this world, then Mr. Musk will say, well, I'm the king of the skies. I can decide when you can leave this planet. So who made Mr. Musk the king of the skies? Who gave him the
exactly
to become the future emperor of Mars? I'm rebelling to that, I'm afraid.
Well, this is what I'm saying, you know, because I think we, you know, especially over the past 3 years, interviewing a lot of people who've been in the system, who've grown up in the system. I don't know if you've watched any of my interviews over the past 3 years with Jesse Sabota, who actually trained with Elon Musk in the system, right? And I mean, it's obvious that he's the face of something a lot more nefarious than Elon, right? Elon would be the puppet. He would be the face. But, you know, the question is, I'd be interested to know exactly who is pushing that agenda through him. You know, there's so many different people in so many different areas doing different things. I'd just be interested to know who it is that's doing that with Elon.
It's always the same people. It's not always different. I mean, you always see them. You always meet them at Davos every year. You always, I mean, it's always the same globalist agenda that is being pushed here. If Elon was permitted to evolve to this level, and from the years in the PayPal mafia, all the way to Tesla Motors, all the way to SpaceX, to be successful, is because he was, of course, supported by the usual figures behind the scenes, who are the real puppeteers of the New World Order, and who have been there for hundreds of years, of course, as bankers, probably thousands of years as families that have been influencing the world. You see, the banking system has given the possibility to launch Elon Musk from the start. So it is the banking system that you have to study. When you study the banking system, you know that, for example, in London, there is an area of London where you have a temple, basically of the Knights Templar, still there in the center of what is basically the area that the city, all the big corporations, all the great companies launch themselves. Freemasonry, of course, established itself later on in 1717, formalized its launch. But before that, like I said, there was the Knights Templars, who were the ones responsible for the banking system.
Why 1717? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but that to me is like a very interesting number.
Well,
I mean,
because at that time they got to formalize the union of lodges under a gun lodge. That is what happened in 1717.
Do you not think that maybe that time was specifically chosen for a reason? When we're looking at the divination and stuff they use.
I think that numerology is always present in the work of the Freemasons and the Illuminati. In this case, of course, they also choose the St. John the Evangelist, St. John the Baptist. So you have also these 2 times of the year, which are also very important in their work. So they did it with the following their tradition, I mean, which is based on these 2 saints and the vernal equinox, the invernal equinox, and then the summer equinox. And so they follow ancient traditions, of course, that have been laid down even before Christianity in pagan times. The actual discussion regarding John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist will take us way too much time to discuss their influence and how these 2 saints have been so influential in Freemasonry. But it will definitely maybe require a future episodes.
I am actually making a note of that because I want to know how the saints, I mean, I understand, when we're just looking at stuff now, so much of what we've revered on our planet, in our religious communities, in our spiritual communities, really is turning out to be a whole lot of, excuse my language, bullshit, right? And it's very interesting. Now, this is the first that I've heard what you're saying from anyone, that the saints, was that John the Baptist, and who was the other one you mentioned?
John the Evangelist, that the 2 Johns represent.
Okay, an evangelist.
It's like, you have the St. John's Eve starting on sunset on the 23rd of June, which is basically St. John the Baptist, and then you have also, of course, St. John the Evangelist for the winter equinox. They pick up, though, all the traditions that come from pagan times. You have to understand that when the Christian faith developed within the Roman Empire, it absorbed the previous cults that were very popular in pagan times. They didn't eliminate them, they just absorbed them. And so at times they included some elements of their worship in the new worship of this or this other saint.
Selective elements, I would imagine. So they would have taken selective elements and worked with that, right? Is that what you're saying?
Like for example, when St. John's Day, the feast day of St. John the Baptist, was established, I think it was the 4th century AD, in honor of the birth of St. John the Baptist. Of course, it was done, in the ancient Roman world. The 24th of June was already the traditional day of the summer solstice. Understand? So it just said, okay, we will, just as the Western Christian churches mark the birth of Jesus on the 25th of December, by the way, making the birth of St. John the Baptist, St. John's Day, so 6 months before St. John's Day. You understand? There is also a
yes.
6 months in advance. So, and then, so it's all calculated, and of course the saints have themselves also a genuine value for those who consider them as holy people that can intercede with God. But the church in itself also manipulated at times this date or this other date or the saints date and this other date just to coincide, let's say.
Yes, absolutely.
And to pick up on previous beliefs that could then be absorbed, let's say. So I think that I gave you there a good understanding of it.
Oh, that is amazing. And in that conversation, you mentioned Salvador Dali. What is your take on him? Because really, he's truly one of my favorite artists, actually. I'd be interested to know, just on for a personal me, what is your take on Salvador Dali?
So, closing with the feast day of St. John in the Catholic Church, you have also the St. John the Evangelist, and that, happens in December. And so here we see the two subjects. When it comes to Salvador Dali, he was a guy who was living within the ambience, the milieu of intellectuals, often illuminated of his time. He had as a muse a transsexual called Amanda Lear, for example, very popular in the 70s discos for his songs in France. And so I think that even Trump, actually, it was Ivanka Trump who said that Trump liked Amanda Lear's songs. Amanda Lear was a very ambiguous figure, but it was considered the muse of Salvador Dali. The images, of course, I went to exhibitions where I saw his beautiful paintings, especially when it comes down also to his own painting of Jesus on the cross. It's incredible. Of course, artistically, he was very gifted.
Yes.
However, I think that he might have also been dealing with a lot of demons that he carefully hid with his artwork. His demons in some way can be seen, let's say, in some of his art. The 1929 piece called the Great Masturbator. It's like, you have though more references to demonic presences with the Temptation of Saint Anthony, which is another important painting of Salvador Dali, for example. So there is also constant references to hallucinogenic elements. There was that period of time, of course, between the 60s and the 70s was filled by psychedelic experimentation. And I think that Salvador Dali indulged, and of course that is the hallucinogenic how was called, the hallucinogenic toreador, il toro hallucinogenico, so I would say in Spanish. And then but the most beautiful painting of Salvador Dali that really showed me that, however, he had some contact with the divine is definitely the Christ of St. John of the Cross, which he made in the early 50s, and it was and it is the most incredible painting. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity once to see it in an exhibition in London, where, by the way, I managed to get in for free with a bunch of people from the OTO at that time, simply by bullshitting myself through at the entrance, saying I was on some guest list. So I managed successfully to get in. So it was kind of interesting. Actually, the guys with me, I remember I was with a guy called Simon Kane, who was the worshipper master of the Tabula Rasa Lodge at the time in London. He was kind of impressed the way I managed to. I pulled out a typical Illuminati move. If you know the ways of the world, you can kind of go through even. I mean, I managed once to even get close to Ratzinger, 5 meters away from him. I didn't have any permission to do that, but I kind of like managed through a few tricks that I will not, of course.
Well,
give out.
From what I'm hearing about Ratzinger, there are lots of people that didn't want to get close to him.
Also close to Pope Francis, but Ratzinger was a different experience because he really struck me as somebody who was really a magician of sorts. He was this little guy. He came close to me with his finger, with the incense burning. And I was like,
no, that one is evil. He's been mentioned, Ratzinger has been mentioned by several SRA victims here in Africa and South Africa and Old Rhodesia as being one of the main abusers. Ratzinger from the Pope, the ex-Catholic.
As you know, I wrote a book, Pope Francis, the Last Pope, which also includes a lot of stories and testimonies regarding Ratzinger. All these popes since the Second Vatican Council seem to have been very disappointing. I mean, when you think about Jimmy Savile receiving a knighthood from John Paul II, I mean, that gives you an idea. I mean, people think of John Paul II as a great saint, but then, if you're giving the knighthood and access to the Catholic hospitals to the biggest pedophile in history, Jimmy Savile, well, that gives
exactly
the real nature of this church. But we can also say Jimmy Savile was also the advisor for the future king. So I mean, that's also another guy who is.
And let's never forget King Charles. King Charles's brother has been running around Epstein Island since forever. It's just interesting that suddenly all of that is now no longer a topic of discussion, right?
Well,
interesting.
Actually, in my website, I invite people to go to leozagami.com. Not so long ago, actually trying to see when exactly, but I think a couple of months ago, maybe less than 2 months ago, a month and a half, I published an article regarding Prince Andrew that also involves partly Africa, because what happened was this. Apparently, Prince Andrew went with the English delegation to Ukraine. He was, of course, not an official part of the delegation, but the delegation was, I think, headed by the Minister of Defense or somebody very high there in England. And it was an official visit that happened. And he went with them, and he was handed 2 children during this visit within a club. Now there is a guy who was working at this club, was the manager of this club in the center that still exists in the center of Ukraine. But apart from describing the clubs in Kiev as actually very active these days, people think we are in the middle of a warfare, but because Kiev is so well defended and everything, Kiev has become a party town, while the rest of Ukraine people are fighting and dying. All this money that is pumped into Ukraine is also making the nightlife of Ukraine very, very extravagant in Kiev. Now, these 2 children were literally brought to him. He describes this manager in this. He actually was shocked by the whole thing, ended up going back to Africa after this terrible experiment. And I don't remember the title of the article, but I'm trying to find it so I can give it to you and to your viewers. But the testimony is really shocking, and it's kind of gross. I mean, he started to touch these children, and then at the end, he brings them, he picks them up, and he brings them with him on his helicopter, and then he brings them away on his plane. Now, there is also testimony. This guy said that he promised his children to bring them to Disneyland Paris, Prince Andrew. And apparently there is logins of the plane that was used to go in Ukraine that after stops in Paris. So there is also other testimony. I mean, there has been, I think, an African news service that has made some research about it to confirm what happened. And so, I mean, it's shocking, but that's what's going on, unfortunately.
No, those royals are well renowned for being in Africa, and especially Kenya. They love Kenya, and Kenya was where Prince William.
In this case, it was actually the Ukrainian children that were used, but it was this Nigerian manager of this club who testimony. Then he was interviewed. I don't remember if it was Namibia TV or I have to find it in my article, because I actually linked also the video testimony of this gentleman.
I'd love to see that, please. Is it on your where is it on your channel?
It is
I'd actually like
to website, but I am trying to find the article. Unfortunately, it's not like, I don't think it's something I wrote, I think, in August, but I'm not sure. So I'm going through the various articles now quickly to see if I can find it for you. And I think it's important that people check out this testimony, because after, of course, the guy covered his face. He didn't, show his face because he was pretty scared of his testimony. I mean, the guy was so disgusted about what he seen in Kiev with Prince Andrew that he actually left his job. So this is just once again the testimony of something horrible happening around Prince Andrew. I mean, Prince Andrew is definitely a pervert, but when you think that the brother was the friend of Jimmy Savile, who knows if the brother is just as bad? And the fact that he is a king now means that also there is another thing that I wrote about. The government, the British government and the British authorities have requested to seal all the secrets regarding Prince Andrew until he is 65. Until he is, in 65 years, I don't know, something crazy. So, I mean, basically, they are not allowed to even disclose anything about what Prince Andrew has done. By law, this is something that has been decided recently that you can't, apart from the fact you cannot talk, for example, about King William, the future King William, Prince William, and all the other members of the family. But also you have some restrictions regarding Prince Andrew that will not be disclosed for another, I don't know how many number of years. So they are trying to, the royal family and the British government are trying to keep everything secret and of course not disclose all of this, because it will be damaging for the royalty. The royalty in England is having already so many problems, and many of them are of credibility problems. And I think that what happened with Prince Andrew and Epstein has been a very big also thing for them. So
it's huge. You know, when also, I mean, regarding the British royals, especially all the royal families, actually, I mean, more and more whistleblowers, when you again speaking to people that have come out of satanic ritual abuse, that have been violated and abused. I mean, there will be hundreds of people that I know that have told us what is happening underneath Windsor Castle and Kensington and all of those places. I mean, these people are evil.
I tend to believe there is also been some disinformation that has been carefully presented to people like David Icke, who have overly exaggerated certain elements. When it came down to the reptilian element of the Queen Mother, for example, yes, I mean, I can say that for sure. I mean, the Queen Mother was the cousin of my grandfather, so I know a little bit that family. And I can tell you, they don't have, a tail or any particular feature that I can see is different from another human. I mean, I would be myself a reptilian if that was the case. So there is also, at times this information that tends to exaggerate certain elements. But then there is the truth that actually once it's discovered, it's at times even more shocking than any fake conspiracy theory that might have been circulating. That is at least my idea.
Well, I tell you what, Leo, I believe the people that are telling these stories. That's who I believe. I've long ago stopped believing these. I don't even want to call them elites because they're not. They're monsters. They really are monsters. Really. That's the opinion I have. I believe the survivors and the overcomers when they tell us these stories. There are too many similar stories that are being told.
Like I said, there might be a lot of the stories that are true. There might be also those that are maybe too outlandish and that are placed there to then, in a way, give less credibility to the real evidence. So we have to. I tend to be very much sticking to elements or to sources that I find credible. But I mean, like you said, there is, of course, these people are very powerful and they have indulged in a lot of things that are wrong, but not only in England, in South Africa, in Australia,
everywhere.
In the former British Empire, we can say there has been a lot of wrongdoing.
A lot. That empire has a lot to answer for.
Yes.
That's for sure.
That's for sure.
But I think all of us have something to answer for and a lot to answer for at the end of the day. Anyway, I'm not sure. Okay, it looks like we're kind of out of time, but I'm just looking if there's maybe one.
I'm trying to find for you that article. I have it. It was published. That's why I couldn't find it. I published it not so long ago, on the 7th of September. I can share it with you here in the private chat if you want, or on the public one, so then everybody can have a look.
Yeah, put it on the public chat, and then whoever needs to see it does.
On the private, so then you can put it on the public, because I don't think this from this router.
Okay.
One. So I sent it to you, and it's basically, you have the article is entitled "Top Secret: Prince Andrew allegedly kidnaps 2 Ukrainian children, but the truth can only be revealed in 2065." That's why I told you that the English have created this, the English royalty and the English authorities, this block on all information regarding Prince Andrew until 2065. He went there with James Cleverly, who is the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. He was there in Ukraine. The witness himself has shocking details. You will see in the article the actual video testimony. So of this James Obaza, who claims that Prince Andrew was part of the British delegation that visited Kiev and who was handed these 2 children. And it actually at this Parkovy Congress and Exhibition Center, which is the place where the club was. And also on the article, I share the logs of the aircraft that stopped in Paris, the Dassault 900 LX private aircraft that was used. And you can, of course, yourself have a look at the whole thing, because I find that this story has been forgotten way too fast. So if we can maybe amplify it to your viewers, that would be of help.
Absolutely. And definitely have future discussions around that as well. But I'm just going to ask you one final question before we go. Why are we ruled by the number 7?
The number 7, it's a very important subject which I touched in volume 9, also because, as you know, I did this volume 9 in 7 chapters, and these 7 steps in this imaginary ladder of mine, in some way, are also connected to the idea that they always had around the number 7 in the initiatic circles, let's say. So it's in the initiatic circles, the Pythagoreans used to say that the heptad, which means a group of set of 7, was the father of all things. So it's also for that reason. But the number 7 for the Illuminati, in fact, if you go into the Italian language, which is directly from the Latin language, sette, 7, means both sects and 7. So a sect, it's you see there is a direct connection there with and then you have, of course, the importance in the esoteric world, but it's obvious. I mean, you have 7 days in the week, you have 7 planets, you have 7 notes in the music, you have basically everything relating to the number 7. And it was the Gnostics who had the ideas that, you see, we have a benevolent view of the number 7 as Christians. At times, the alchemists used to relate the numbers, the 7 planets to the 7 archangels, and that was what the ordinary Christians would do, alchemists. But the Gnostic concept of the number 7 is also that we are basically oppressed and ruled by the 7 planets and their influence. And I think that that's very clear in a film which I cite in my book, which is basically the film The Holy Mountain of Jodorowsky. So the importance of the number 7 is in the whole of esoteric beliefs. And
it's one of the sacred numbers, yes. 3, 4, 7, and 12, sacred numbers.
Yes,
7 is here.
7 in particular. It's I think probably the one that has influenced more than anyone else, because it is the number of the 7 planets. So it is the number that, in a way, has probably influenced, and so we are ruled in a way, by this number.
I'm interested because you mentioned 7 planets, and I like that because when you're looking at the ancient astronomers and astrologers, even they work with the 7 original planets. Nowadays, when we're looking at the modern, let's say, astrology, stuff like that, they've brought in 4 more planets, I think. So now we're working with 11 planets if you just look at the solar system currently. What's your take on the fact that 4 additional planets, so to speak, have been added to our solar system?
Well, I mean, for me, it doesn't make really a difference because I'm not an astronomer, but I go back to the 7 because 7 was what the ancients in their own traditions that then built religions, built philosophies, so the 7 rungs of Jacob's ladder are replaced by the actual planetary spheres. So it's for me, it's irrelevant to what they consider now, if they consider Uranus a planet or not, or if they, for me, it's irrelevant because I simply, I related to the ancients. So that's why in my book, when I write about the number 7, I kind of related to esoteric philosophy, to what Madame Blavatsky, for example, said in the Theosophical Society, when she explained that the Pythagoreans also, because you have to understand, the Pythagoreans are the secret society created by Pythagoras, an extremely influential figure in our world for what he has done. Geometrically speaking, without Pythagoras, these are the foundations of what we have around us,
Yeah, and absolutely.
he was an initiate, of course, an initiate of the old ancient mystery schools of Alexandria and so on. So there is this link also between the ancient Greeks and Alexandria of Egypt, which is very important in all this. And the Pythagoreans will consider the figure 7 as the image and model of the divine order and the harmony in nature. So for them, the number 7 was considered sacred, but it was not only considered sacred by them, but also by a number of nations of antiquity and also of the East, by the way, not only here in the West, with great reverence. So the astronomical origin of this number is established beyond any doubt. The Egyptians had 7 original and higher gods, for example, the Egyptians. The Phoenicians, 7 so-called, they used to call them Kabiris. The Persians, the 7 horses of Mitra in the Mitraic cult, which is was very important and very influential also within the Roman Empire until the arrival of Christianity. The Pharisees had 7 angels opposed to 7 demons, and so we have the whole heaven concept of the ancients was based on these 7 planets, and that's why in nearly all religious systems we find the 7 heavens. So that's why I did this book in 7 chapters, volume 9, which is a book that you can, like I said in previous episodes that we did together in interviews, you can read without reading the other books. You don't have to read volume 1, 2, 3. People ask me, where should I start with? Well, if you want to start with volume 9, you can, because it's a book that you can.
It's got everything. Yeah, it's got everything condensed.
So we are 7 minutes past the 60 minutes now. 65. I think we're about to end up.
Well spotted. Well spotted.
Yeah.
And on that note,
between these angels, like I mentioned, the archangels earlier. Michael, the archangel Michael, was seen as Saturn, and this can be a contradiction for some people. See Saturn as more evil, more Michael. Gabriel, which was known with the motto Fortitudo Dei, with Jupiter. Jupiter has always been the planet of the emperor, the planet of power. In fact, in the tarot cards, it's represented by the emperor. Then you have Mars, which is the god of war, but is also the archangel Uriel, Ignis Dei. Then you have the sun, which is also considered among these planets because it was included within the planets. So also they included the sun. So Zerachiel was the sun. The motto was Oriens Deus. And then Camuel, which is basically Venus, known as the indulgent god, the indulgent Indulgentia Dei, the indulgence of God. And then Raphael, which is the medicine of God, Medicina Dei, was Mercury. And then last but not least, the moon, which we often associate with Isis, but for the alchemist was associated with the angel Zophiel, with the motto Abscindutus Deus. So I think that we have covered the whole thing. For the rest, read the book. And of course, thank you so much for having me on. Every month we are here to bestow more light, hopefully, on subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you on, Leo. Thank you so much. Just want to check some of those comments. Are interesting. Berner Stain, 1770 because of gematria-based values. Nobody mentions gematria in this New Age truth community. Lots of gematria is spoken about here, Berner. A lot of people are talking about it, that's for sure. Thank you for that comment. Actually makes sense.
That within also Freemasonry, the initiatic secret, and the various initiatic societies here in the West, the Gematria and Notaricon have definitely, but especially Gematria more than Notaricon. This is something that I discussed recently with an initiate who has written some books of interest regarding also the association between colors, numbers, planets, And they told me that the use of the notaricon was more closely associated with the Kabbalist, and the Kabbalists who are, because notaricon is one of the 3 ancient methods used by the Kabbalists. And it's a method of deriving a word by using each of its initial or final letters. But then you have also the gematria, and it's a different way of interpreting through the numbers. So I guess that people get very confused, and actually it's a very confusing subject because it's not a very simple subject by any means. It requires years of studies, and notarius, the notaricon comes from the word Latin notarius, which is a shorthand writer. That's what it means.
Wow.
I hope
that's amazing.
Some clarity to some people who are here. Of course, it's always a pleasure to answer to the questions on the chat board.
Indeed. Leo, again, thank you. Now we're on 111, 111, so on the time.
Well, 11 was the key of all rituals for Aleister Crowley and for the OTO. 11 is a very important number because also, let's not forget, though, and this reminded my 33-degree ring, which I still at times wear, 11, 11, 11, which is 33. And so definitely a very important number. Thank you so much for having me on. God bless you guys, and see you next month, I guess.
Yeah, God bless you. We will see you on the last Friday of the month again. I'm not sure what the date is, but keep a check on our schedules. But we look forward to having you back then, Leo. And I want to just say thank you again to all our viewers for joining us this evening. Always a pleasure to talk to Leo, and I know you guys all agree. Always amazing information, and really enjoying what the book is about. So Amazon, Leo, I do believe that we would have your link in the description area anyway for your books.
Check out www.leozagami.com for all the latest articles, including
there we go.
Where we discussed from September 7th from Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
And, of course, please purchase this work, which has, of course, I think, a purpose, which is to bring the people awareness on certain things that they will not find anywhere else. So I think that the concept of this book for this 7 step is to really make you aware and to also prepare you for what is coming next, but also to give you the right, I guess, the right tools to also survive what's coming next, because not everybody will be able to survive. And I'm not saying survive in the sense that, we have to be ready to, I mean, of course, I have here 4 or 5 months of food dried under my feet. I have all kinds of generators. And this is practical. So this is what it's related to what my father would have said, physical, chemical. It's physical stuff. But then there is people who will not survive mentally, and they're already not surviving mentally. They're already falling into that crisis that is enriching the mental health crisis. Because when people say that the mental health crisis is only pushed by the use of drugs, no, that's not I don't think that's the only reason. It is, of course, one of the prevailing reasons, but I think that the other reason for this mental health crisis is it's the fact that we can't relate to this reality any longer. We are so shocked by what happens in front of our eyes each day, and some people simply snap, and then at that point they end up having some very serious problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that book, if it's read and understood, can help not fall prey of that crisis, let's say.
I watched something very interesting, and I'm just going to end off on that, which is actually very interesting. It just gives us another take. Right now, I actually mentioned it on my earlier show with Danny Henderson earlier. But I actually watched something today with somebody saying, of course, with all the symbolism, virtual signaling, all of that stuff, and of course the information that's coming out now. You know, really at the end of the day, when we know what we're dealing with, when we can see the symbolism, we understand the language that these guys talk. There's enough whistleblowers and disclosures that are telling us these things. So when we
symbolism, needs to be understood and interpreted at times. Like we were saying a moment ago when we were discussing the fact that at times there is a lot of fake news, or that some of these whistleblowers or people that simply are bringing us shocking truths can be maybe not real. At times, the problem is also the perception of the truth. The fact that certain things can be interpreted if you have a clear understanding of that symbolism.
Yeah.
Like for example, the reptilian hypothesis. The reptilian hypothesis is a symbolic representation of the demonic genies. When we go and study how genies or demons are represented in many cultures, we see that they are many times represented as reptiles. So that is a symbolic thing that then gets misinterpreted, and suddenly I become a reptilian and I'm having a tail here in between my legs, which I don't see. So that's what I'm saying.
So a lot of it is symbolic, yeah. Okay.
Symbolism needs to be interpreted correctly. So,
well, that's very true. So, because when we really understand the symbolism about what's going on, and that's why we've got to educate ourselves, we are then able to be clear, understand what's going on, and not get caught up in this trap of nonsense. At the end of the day, we've got to all be responsible for our own well-being, and of course, those around us who are not.
Remember that
position to be responsible.
The thing is that I think that because the internet in the last 20, 25 years has been able to, not 20 years, let's say, has really been able to bring us a lot of information. The problem also is to interpret this information in the correct way. And because the enemy, the New World Order, knows exactly that they couldn't put a lid on this internet information immediately. When they started, when the internet was launched, and it was basically launched from CERN, it was launched by what already used to be, it was a military setup, because they were the ones who created this system. And they gave it to us, knowing that for the first few decades, we will be able to access info that might be dangerous for them. So then what happens? They plant into the system unnecessary fake news and outlandish info to just then be able to discredit us later on. So this is what happens. And that is something I also warned my colleague David Icke when he had earlier in his, he was surrounded by all these whistleblowers that were giving him all this crazy information, including, I think, some African shaman of sorts. And then, though, can we actually trust these sources? Because, he was saying and he's saying still to this day some very serious things that, I think David has made an excellent job. But also, you have to be careful to consider, that the enemy
discernment. We have to use our discernment.
And the enemy would send you, of course, people telling you some outlandish stuff, I remember once I was about to go on InfoWars with Alex Jones, and suddenly there was this guy who was talking about Mars colonies of enslaved little children. Now, he was some kind of former CIA operative, and I was like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Why is he giving this kind of information? What is his intent? His intent was to discredit then the whole the whole show. Fortunately, I came after him, bringing a explosive revelation about an orgy that went on inside the palace of what used to be the Holy Inquisition in the Vatican, and I broke this news before everyone else in the world, which a week after was then brought out even by the BBC. So it was a real scoop, a real journalistic scoop. But before that, we had to hear this idiot talking about the colonies of children on Mars, which I thought it was just a man.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
it is a crazy world we're living in right now, Leo. For sure.
And God bless you all, guys.
And you too. And thank you so much to our beautiful viewers. You guys rock. Thank you so much for those of you who support our channel, our Patreons, as always. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Without you, our channel would not have its nuts and bolts. And on that note, happy Friday, happy weekend. God bless you all. And I will see you next week. Take good care.